And to welcome back onto the stage, Kathryn Hadler from ESRIC, Bernhard Hufenbach from ESA, Mathias Link, he is a new face. Mathias Link, well, a new face to some of us, is the Deputy CEO from the Luxembourg Space Agency. And we have Aarti, who will join us again on stage now for this panel discussion. Thank you. So, as has been mentioned, the lights are strong. I can't see people very clearly, but I really love audience involvement. So, if you want to ask a question at any point in this panel discussion, please do. I'm going to start with you. Thank you for your very condensed speech. We're very happy to have you here. And congratulations on everything that you're setting up over there. Now, I'm going to just jump in because a lot of people might be Googling you and they'll look at your past and they'll see that you spent a long time at NASA. We're not going to talk geopolitics. I just wondered, from your time there, what best practices are you bringing to Korea?
One of the advantages of working at NASA was able to see the mindset of the people that are at NASA. And I think the mindset is can-do kind of an attitude. And I think that's what I would like to also instill with our employees at KASA, to say, hey, we are a small agency, we're just very new, but yet, yes, we still can do.
And just talking to Bernhard before we came here, Bernhard showed a lovely picture of the dusty thermal vacuum chamber that you have, but I think he's got vacuum chamber jealousy because he mentioned to me that you have the biggest in the world.
Yes, Korea has the 4.7 meter dusty, I think, thermal vac chamber. We call it the dirty chamber, but I think that's actually better. It's dusty because it's got a lot of regolith in it. But we do have one of the biggest in Korea is the 4.7 meter thermal vac chamber, yes.
And it's open for anyone to use?
That is correct. In fact, it's one of the best kept secret. They were trying to make it not a secret so that it becomes available for people from all over the world to see. One other thing that I want to mention is that there is actually a tiltable table that has regolith on it, and that could inclination about 30 degrees. So it's the capability has been around for a few years already.
Bernhard, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do take a microphone. But I think you had the burning question, how useful is it?
No, not how useful. It is very useful. I just wonder how many users already are making active use of the chamber today.
Well, the Koreans are certainly using it. Other parties have come and used it. And what I would like to see happen is more users come from the international community so that it becomes accessible.
So that's enough about vacuum chambers. So you know there's a very large one. If you want to use it, then you know where it is. So therefore, the advertisement is done. Matthias, lovely to have you with us. Let's just do, I know we're going to talk about next steps thinking forward, but let's have a step back. And for those in the audience who've been coming here regularly, they might know that about 9 years ago, spaceresources.lu was founded, which is older than the Luxembourg Space Agency. And so that was always the first step here in the space world, apart from SES. So how have things evolved?
It was an amazing ride over the past 9 years. If you look back at spaceresources.lu, over the past 5 years, if you look back at ESRIC creation, if you look back at LSA as well, we celebrated 5 years last year. So there were so many things happening in Luxembourg over the past more or less 10 years. It's really been amazing. So maybe I can focus on the space resource part because that's the conference we're in. When we started the spaceresources.lu initiative in 2016, we actually had a blank page in space exploration. And by blank, I mean blank. I'm an engineer, and if you need to promote things that do not really exist, it's pretty hard at the beginning. So it was more about communicating, setting up a strategy, making sure that we get the pillars right. And looking back, of course, we have the successes we have today. It's really been amazing. We have made progress in all the main pillars that we had. So very quickly speaking about these pillars, we had, of course, the international pillars, partnering with the European Space Agency, partnering with many other countries in Europe, but also outside Europe. And we continue to do this. We are in very close discussion, for example, now with Korea as well. With JAXA, with NASA. Unfortunately, we don't have many people from NASA this year, but we have one who has been with us from the very start 7 years ago, and even earlier. So internationally, lots of things have happened. We have, of course, the legal and regulatory pillar, where we had a first national law in Luxembourg. We always said that would be a first important step that we could take nationally, but of course, as Aarti already said, we were extremely active at the United Nations as well, with lots of progress there. I'm sure Aarti will cover that. The industrial part, we started off with no company in that area in Luxembourg. Today we have many companies and one company that is about to land on the moon, looking for resources and preparing a commercial transaction of space resources to NASA. And then, of course, we have the research part, where we created ESRIC together with ESA and the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. And ESRIC is growing, the conference here is growing, the incubation program is working. We have lots of interesting research results already. So even though this remains a long-term topic, with many challenges that are very much interlinked, I think the past years have shown us how much progress we have made, and with hindsight, we were right to launch this initiative.
You've painted a wonderful picture there, a very positive picture. And at the start, of course, we had the catalyst. That was Etienne Schneider, who was an MP here in Luxembourg at the time. Do you feel Luxembourg is still on the map in the same way that it was back then?
Of course. No, we of course had a minister back then that was extremely committed to space and took a big bet on space resources. But we already had another minister in between our current one and Etienne Schneider, Franz Fayo, who backed the whole initiative. And we had, for example, the ESRIC launch was with Franz Fayo. And now we have Minister Dallas, who I think already had to leave, who just extended the agreement that we had with ESRIC last year. So we have basic funding for ESRIC secured until the end of this decade. So, and by the way, we still have space resources as one of our 4 main pillars of the Luxembourg space strategy. So we still have a very strong backing of our government for space and for space resources in particular.
Thank you, Mathias. Bernhard, I was listening to John, and I know it's a very important pillar for ESA to develop private partnerships and to work in collaboration as well. So when you're working with the private sector and when you want to work with the private sector, who should work with ESA and who should work with you?
Of course, when we try to develop an economy, we are trying to develop it in Europe. So we are trying to stimulate an ecosystem in Europe to advance capabilities in the field of space resources by growing startups, accelerating projects. So I would say any company which wants to have a location here, an establishment in Europe, is welcome to work with us. Any company who wants to work in Korea, of course, is welcome in Korea, and I hope they work together, because as agencies work together, it's also exciting to see that the startups become very international. You have startups with 4 or 5 staff members having 3 establishments across the world. So it's really changing. The international footprint of startups is changing.
Yeah, so KASA would probably be, again, as he mentioned, it would be the administration or the agency through which that we can coordinate. I have been in contact in a lot of the embassies in Korea to try to get in touch, but mainly what I'm trying to do is enable the private sector to engage with the European as well as other countries' private sector and have that. But our goal is to enable that, and so in fact, I have turned over a list of a lot of the aerospace companies that are in Korea to many European embassies, so that they in turn could turn around and introduce that. And also, there have been a number of embassy days in Korea where I have invited a lot of our Korean companies to participate so that they could network and begin to establish many of their relationships.
Thank you. The difference, of course, with ESA is that it's a conglomeration of countries. It's not acting as one unity, as opposed to one country. What are the challenges within that, and how are you overcoming them with increased speed of decision-making?
That's interesting. I mean, if you take the topic of space resources is a big topic in ESA today, but it's thanks to one of our member states, Luxembourg. They started in 2016, the Space Resource Initiative. ESA was waking up in 2019, and so it took 3 years. So what we always need in ESA, we need to have strong leadership of our member states to push certain topics, but then we need to enlarge the footprint because we're a European organization. So I think we now just see transition where other member states really get interested in this topic, working with ESRIC, working with us. So I think it's a combination of both strong national leadership and then enlarging the footprint and creating European cooperation and international cooperation.
And if you could wish for anything in the next 5 years under your leadership and your strategy going forward, what would you wish for your vision for Europeans' footprint in this particular world, space resources?
Now, I think when you read the strategy, we are calling for European excellence in space resources. It's quite challenging because, to put it in perspective, we are just preparing the program proposal for our next ministerial meeting, end of this year, which was mentioned. We will ask for more than 3 billion euros funding for space exploration. Less than 1% is allocated for space resources. So funding-wise, it's a challenge, but we are already in the early days of this new topic. So I think what I wish for is that we take the right decisions in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years to see a number of successful demonstrations of capabilities, application on the moon before the end of the decade. I'm not talking about billion missions, I'm talking about small, smart payloads, largely led by industry. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for an industry-led initiative, and then successfully demonstrate some application which can grow in the next phase. So I think success means for me that we at least deliver 5 demonstrators before 2030.
Thank you. Aarti, I have to just throw in that I was reading about you, and one of the things that jumped out about you is you were the president of the Ballroom Dancing Society at university. So this is fabulous. So we look forward to some moves later on in the evening. But let's get back to business. You have a large load at the moment. The world is not an easy place to build collaboration. How are you going about the conversations that you will be having at a very high level to have global buy-in?
Obviously, we're just going to dance together. I mean, that's what I was good at, right? I can't believe you found that in my bio, but okay. It is very difficult, but I think that COPUS and the member states have actually shown considerable foresight. When we look at space resources, this was an agenda item on COPUS's work plan since 2017 already. And we are ahead of the curve when it comes to working on the draft set of recommended principles. So it's actually going quite well. But there's 2 legs to this horse, if you will, right? There's the space resources side and the content and the principles, which is one thing. But what concerns me most is safety. We already have a safety and sustainability issue in Earth orbit, the moon being, a 1/6 of the size of the Earth, that could very quickly become a more difficult problem around our celestial body. And that's where ATLAC comes in. And so my hope is that we really help member states focus on the need for coordination and information sharing early. We're having the same discussion going on right now in the Committee on Space Traffic Coordination. It's more or less the same thing, but just about a different body when it comes to lunar coordination as well. So that's now the next priority. Space resources principles going well. The next, the ATLAC has to accelerate in parallel as well.
And you said in your talk that your greatest fear is the failure to deliver. That line particularly, what would make that happen, or what would avoid that happening?
it's very easy for member states to see things through a political lens rather than an operational or technical lens. If you put engineers in a room, you solve a problem. You put politicians or diplomats in a room, it's more difficult. But we have to get past the diplomatic, political stage in order to allow the operational experts to convene and get around one table together. So we have to go through that process. The advantage of having the diplomats and the politicians is that if you don't get their trust, if you don't get their buy-in, you'll never go beyond. You will have a suboptimal solution. So we do, even if it could be slow, it could be painful, we have to go through that process. And that's where the potential of different camps forming becomes relevant and becomes tricky. I'm thinking about ILRS on the one hand, Artemis Accords on the other. We, as the UN, we don't want to see camps forming. We don't want to see signing up to one or the other to be seen as a political statement only. At the end of the day, everybody cares about safety and sustainability. They really do. And nobody wants to crash their lander or rover to crash with anybody else's. So our challenge is to keep them focused on their operational imperative and not just see things through the political lens.
I think we need more engineers becoming diplomats and politicians, if anybody who fancies a career change. Kathryn, not suggesting you want to fancy a career change, but you did say to me, the word of our week has been uncertainty on many levels. So in a world where that is certainly the feeling for many people, where do you plan using some certainty? How do you plan a vision with some certainty?
That's a really interesting question. Actually, in the world of space resources, we're very comfortable with uncertainty because we are surrounded by uncertainty. And we work with a lot of uncertainties. What we do know is that we will see more missions to understand resources more. I think you can see this in the ESA strategy and ESA Explore 2040 with the prospecting activity. So we know that at some point more data will be forthcoming on the resources of interest. And so with that in mind, we can still carry on designing processes, technologies, approaches for the use of space resources with the understanding that in time, the level of uncertainty will reduce or the certainties increase. And I think playing on what we know and keeping all of our options as open as possible until we know more and can advance forward is really what we can do in this field. It's an interesting field to inhabit because there's so much that we don't know, but there's so much that we can do with that level of uncertainty until we have more data available.
And then I know a few of you on the panel are working with researchers, and we really need to put a spotlight on the researchers. And of course, over the number of years that this has been happening, we've seen some of those researchers spin off into their own companies and various things have happened. So what needs to be put in place to help researchers that come here, that are here, and continue to build from the ground up everything that will become the future for space resources?
There are a lot of excellent people in space resources in the research domain. There's a lot of great ideas. You can see the number of researchers that we see in this domain is increasing every year. And I said earlier on to Bernhard, I think it's a real sign of maturity in the sector. The academic level has certainly increased quite significantly over the last few years. And I think that's a real strength. So we are moving forward on a really solid basis now. I think what is needed for researchers, some will stay in academia, some will go out and form their own companies, some will go into industry. And actually what really helps is to have a really thriving industry sector in this domain for jobs to go into, that feedback between research and academia and the industry sector. So the commercial activity that Bernhard talked about is really important, that enabling the commercial sector, because that promotes opportunity for people to go into industry, for industry to work with academia and so on. And I think that's really what's needed at the moment.
I would like to open up to the floor. We've got time on the panel, and I would love you, whilst we have these panelists on the stage, to ask any questions you would like to ask. I can't see any hands right now in the first two rows, I can see a hand over here. Aha, Clive. Bruno will bring you a microphone.
Yes, Clive Neal, University of Notre Dame, and I've been listening to these talks this morning, and it's been quite amazing, a theme of prospecting. We heard it from JAXA, we heard it from CSA, Korea, ESA, the prospecting, and then Aarti's talk about cooperation and coordination. And so with the prospecting, how are you coordinating that? There's various activities going on, and how are you pulling that all together in an international cooperative way? And I'd like the panel's view on that, please.
They're very, I think we'll keep the microphone with Clive just in case he wants to kind of come back. Bernhard.
Well, I think you point to the fact that we need to develop an international campaign, and I think that idea is fully supported by ESA. I think we need to make sure that the mission to some extent become complementary, that there is some data sharing, maybe not all data, but that the individual mission complement each other, not overlapping too much.
Well, again, just thinking about that, there's a lot of good ideas out there. And if we're going to look for resources on the moon or anywhere else, space is very big, and the moon may be 1/6 the size of the Earth, but you look at the top 10 PSRs, it's 5,900 square kilometers of real estate. That's a lot of rovers. So coordinating them, and that's why I'm thinking that we need data in order to move this field forward, in my opinion. But you know, coordinating it so that we really know where there are or there are not reserves of materials that could be used is going to be fundamental in moving the whole field forward. And as I say, you're up there, you're representing different space agencies, and got Ernest down here. We'll throw him under the bus in a minute. But I think you know, this coordination becomes more and more critical in order to make that one mission mean a whole lot more than just a mission. It becomes part of something bigger.
And so what is the best way to take that data and to gather that data together?
Well, again, ESRIC and ESA have started this with the forget what do you call it, Kathryn? The resource
report.
That's the one. There we go. It's jet lag. John and I have something in common. But you know, these are steps that are happening. And then hearing Aarti speak at the legal subcommittee a couple of weeks ago, the cooperation is there, and listening to the delegates and delegations from various countries there talking about it. See, I'm not an engineer, I'm a geologist. So I was a fish out of water there, but learned an awful lot. But that cooperation, that international cooperation is essential to moving this whole sector forward and making ISRU a reality, and you know, creating a permanent human presence off this planet. So I think that the more agencies talk together and coordinate, that's something that's going to be really essential for moving it forward.
Yes, in fact, that's one of the things that I am doing right now is talking to various agencies so we could pinpoint some of those common areas where we can have common projects. One of the things that I'm trying not to emphasize is the MOU. A lot of people are very hung up on the idea of having a piece of paper. I prefer to actually have concrete projects that we could identify and go at it so that we don't waste a lot of time looking for areas where we could collaborate. So this is one of the reasons I'm here, but I'm also visiting a lot of other, having a lot of online conversation with various space agencies so that the agencies are there to promote that collaboration. And I think it's going to be the key, at least for me, from my perspective. KASA is going to be the agency through which a lot of this coordination is going to happen. And so, as you mentioned, one of the things that we're developing is a list of all these various projects that are potential projects that are there, not only on the moon, but a number of other space science areas. But certainly the moon is really the quote, the hot topic these days. And so certainly that's an area that we're going to be focusing on the next year.
Well, you get it right at the moon, maybe you get it right at Mars, you know. Get the blueprint. So.
Well, we're going to Mars in 45, and so we'll certainly, once we get to the moon, then we'll get to Mars.
Yeah, I'll still be working then.
Great.
Thank you, Clive. And we have a question down here at the back. Oh, we have a couple of questions. Brilliant. Oh, three, in fact. 3 questions. Okay. So, and Jerry has a question. Oh, Jerry has the mic. Go, Jerry.
Okay. Touching on what Aarti and Clive have
And just
talked
introduce yourself to
about.
anybody who might not know you.
So Jerry Sanders, I work for NASA. I lead ISRU for some time. And based on the fact that I've worked ISRU for a long time, I am an engineer. I'm not a politician or a lawyer or a geologist. I've promoted both the idea of performing demonstrations of ISRU leading to eventual industrialization at some point. At the same time, throughout my career, I've heard about the space, the Outer Space Treaty and the legality of extracting resources and selling it. So to the panel, including Aarti, what's the balancing act that you see between promoting demonstrations of ISRU heading forward with how much rules and regulations have to be imposed on those, so that there's this balancing act of we can do this, but there is some limitation on how you do these things. So I'd like your opinion as we move forward on that.
Are you suggesting the testing should be done before?
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying we're duly promoting the fact that we perform these demonstrations. At the same time, we're promoting the fact that we have to do these things through legal aspects, that we have to have some level of, whether it's use cases or norms or procedures, so how do we balance those two aspects of, no, you can't do that because we haven't defined the requirements yet, to, well, we really should do that because we want to advance civilization?
Aarti.
I don't have the complete answer to that. I think that you'll get a more comprehensive answer out of the legal and regulatory panel later. However, if you look at the 10 comprehensive headings of the draft principles that have been shared with member states, which are available publicly, you can see that some of these issues are already being at least highlighted for further discussion. So nobody wants to stifle the innovation or slow it down, etc. It's clear that those activities will continue, but the discussion on all of those aspects is happening in parallel. The balance is there. I mean, obviously, achieving consensus on those principles will take some time. But as I said, we are a little bit ahead of the game, so maybe consensus will form quicker. But I think you will get a better answer out of the later panel.
4 to 6 p.m. in the delegates' room this evening. So long as we have a microphone in that area, I know Mathias wants to come in, so a microphone at least in this area. Mathias.
Yes, I want to mention, I think the balance is indeed, it's already there, and it's all a timing issue in the end. And I want to mention the exercise that we did in The Hague, International Space Resources Governance Working Group. It's a very long name, which was a really good exercise where we had this interaction between the different experts that are required to find an international framework in the longer term. We had, around the table, we had diplomats and policymakers and lawyers, but we also had in the same room engineers and scientists and the world of NGOs. And of course, it was an informal working group. It was not as formal, and it has not the same value, let's say, formally as the work that is ongoing at the United Nations. But it was really a very nice exercise that ran over 4 years, where we went in depth into all the different issues that are now on the table at the United Nations in a much more formal way. And one thing that came up very often there is the notion of adaptive governance, which for me was one of the key learnings and key things that we discussed there, that we need to adapt the governance over time. We cannot have the same governance today than the one that we will have in 20 or 30 or 50 years, when we might have large-scale mining activity on a celestial body. Today, and this is also what we see over the 3 days at Space Resource Week, we are talking about very small tech demos, scientific experiments, where the current framework that we have is probably sufficient. We don't need a special framework to do this right now. But the art of what we will all have to do over the next years is to come up with the right framework at the right time. And I'm pretty sure that this is feasible, also looking back again at what happened. We had a situation when we put the agenda item on COPWAS in 2017, where there was huge disagreement among COPWAS member states on whether space resource utilization was actually legal and on whether this is something we should have. And now, 7 years later, this is not a question at all. Now we're talking practicalities on how to do it, but no one is questioning that this will actually come. So it shows that this is really a very complex topic where you have this interaction between legal, business, science, finance, and it all needs to evolve step by step. And this is what we have seen and what we will also see in the future.
Thank you. I like that word, adaptive governance. How does that fit in with the legal aspects?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to make that point about some years ago, nobody agreed on this. There was really very diverse views, and as Mathias said, they all came online, and now we actually see them accelerating. The member states are accelerating in their work. However, adaptive is absolutely key. That's why we don't see work on binding rules, etc. We don't live at a time when the geopolitics right now is not right for determining binding rules. But principles, guidelines, these kind of things can be flexible, can be agile. And especially when we're talking about researching and prospecting, a body where we don't know where the concentrations are, how much is there. We have to really rely on an agile framework, and that is what the member states are working towards.
Thank you, Aarti. I know we have a flurry of questions from this corner. Yes.
Oh.
Is it Jim?
Yes.
Hello, Jim.
Hello, good morning. Jim Caravella, Off-World. Thank you for the comments. I've heard a lot of similar conversations over the last 10 to 15 years, and I think we are making good progress in the space resources sector. What would each of you do differently in the coming 10 to 15 years that you wouldn't have done in the previous 10 years? And what courage, boldness, and risk will that call upon for you to undertake those changes?
Well, there's a small question. Kathryn.
Thanks, Lisa. Can I just say, Jim. I would just like to say, Jim, 10 years ago, I wasn't in this field. I was happily researching and trying to optimize froth flotation. So I think if you asked me 10 years ago, I wouldn't even thought that I would be sitting here discussing this. But from my perspective, I think what is needed is, it's easy to say. It's really easy to say this, but it's difficult to implement, and that is more activity, more of these small tech demos, more evidence of what can be done. Like I said, it's easy to say. When I got into this field 2018, around that first meeting at ESTEC, then we were promised that in the next 5-6 years there will be huge numbers of landings, that we would be really progressing. And we do. We see a lot more in the way of lunar activity now, but it's not necessarily been at the rate that we thought it was going to be in 2018. So I think every time that we design a technology, a payload that is tested, or that we send a mission that looks for the characterization of resources, we learn something more, and I think that's really what we should be focusing on.
I'm going to ask for quick bullet point answers so that, because we have a lovely active audience, I want to get in as many questions as possible. Aarti.
I think that there is an urgent need for more transparency and notification of plans that are going to happen, not for the sake of transparency and trust, but in order to give companies the opportunity to see who else is doing what, which may lead to potential collaboration, which is key to sustainability.
Notification of plans to whom?
To the United Nations. I mean, in the long-term sustainability guidelines of 2019, we talk in the term of space traffic coordination that information can be shared with UNUSA. We haven't got that far when it comes to lunar. That's precisely what ATLAC should look at. But I see no reason why member states couldn't already leverage certain provisions of the Outer Space Treaty to inform us of planned missions, even if they are 3, 4, 5 years out. As much detail as we can acquire to foster transparency, to enable potential collaboration, I think is valuable.
Thank you. Bernhard.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're only in this business in ESA since 6 years. I think I could tell you much more about things doing different in my private life, because I think we're doing quite well in the field of space resources. But one concrete lesson I think I learned is when it's about developing ground-based research equipment, which is most of our money goes into this, and we completely underestimate the complexity. We work with non-space industry to underestimate the complexity. Everything takes longer. I think we need to be more careful when we make plans for developing major ground-based infrastructure and work on those projects like a space project. Ground-based research and developing the infrastructure can be nearly as complex as developing space hardware. That's very one lesson for me.
And looking forward?
Looking forward, I think we need to really stimulate, as I said earlier, I really would like to see that we stimulate ideas and creativity for ISU demonstrators. Maybe it was another mistake. We designed this big mission to demonstrate end-to-end the extraction of oxygen from lunar regolith. It cost far more than 100 million. We probably never get it funded. I think we need to think small. We need to listen to industry and get smart ideas for low-cost demonstrators we can quite quickly. I think more demonstrators rather than one costly is more effective. So I think we need to revisit, and I'm looking forward for the input of the community, because I think we have two tools which will allow in future to send demonstrators to the moon. For the Space Resource Challenge, as of Challenge 3, we want to give as a prize a ticket to the moon, to fly a technology to the moon. And also space accelerators, today we want to have demonstrators on ground. In future we want to enable demonstrations in space. So we try to diversify for the community opportunities for in situ demonstrators.
Thank you. Matthias?
Well, looking back, of course, there are many little things that I would have done differently, but it would go into too many details, I think. Overall, I think we got it right. I think we can be pretty happy with what we achieved with the Space Resources Initiative and ESRIC and everything we did over the years with our partners. And looking forward, I would say we should continue along this line, but be even bolder, especially at the European level. I think that would be something that I, as a Luxembourg, as a European, would like to see, to have an increased importance for space resources at the European Space Agency, possibly also at the European Union, and build a strong European-led exploration space resource program together with international partners such as Korea or Japan or any other country that wants to join this endeavor.
And the same question obviously to you, but I mean, you're quite new. So looking back, I mean, it didn't come out of nowhere, KASA, either. But looking forward, I think just to add to Jim's question, how did you come up with the really important pillars that you're going to focus on?
Well, actually, while the agency is new, we're not new to space. And CARE is an institute that is under us, has been involved in this area. And certainly one of the things that we're looking at is, it's not an either-or question, but it's and. And I think that's the issue is, and I think as Aarti mentioned, being transparent and going forward with what we're doing. I mentioned the strategic plan. I didn't mention in my talk that the middle of June we'll be releasing our roadmap that kind of lays out some of the major projects that we'll be undertaking, and that's a 1 to 3 to 5 year roadmap. So that'll give even more clear direction in terms of where we are going. Again, it's a roadmap. It doesn't give you a lot of the details, but at least gives you a sense of where we're going. But the other thing that I want to also mention is, in terms of the engineering versus politics, it should never be either or, but it always should be and, so that we are moving forward in a way that builds a collaborative community. And it's an international effort, and therefore Korea especially needs to be cognizant of that, and certainly that's what we're promoting within KASA.
Thank you. And Jim, we will go to you. Do you still have the microphone, Jim? No. I just wondered, you've been, as you said yourself, in this world, off-world, a long time. What mistakes have you made? And what are you going to change going forward? What's your vision currently?
So, thanks, Lisa. So I think my first big mistake, which was a learning curve with Shackleton Energy Company, a lunar water processing ice excavation company, was trying to undertake the whole big picture in one leap. The mitigation to that was off-world, where we approached Earth as one of the celestial bodies to build our space program on, and I think we got greater success there. And I think the biggest learning points from my perspective is there's no such thing as a space business. There's only business. And so we need to fit into the investment models, the economic models that the global economy has been operating on for decades and centuries, and expand from there. And so when I'm asking my question about what will we do differently in the next 10 to 15 years, I do think we are approaching the potential timing window of opportunity where we can fall into that slipstream of big economics, big opportunities for maintaining production flow coming from space activities and space resources. So I'm excited and grateful for the comments to my question, and excited for what we can do in the next years.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim.
Hi, good morning. Antonino, Lunar Policy Platform and Space Lawyer. I think, things are getting serious when you have professionals like Clive, Jerry, Jim, geologists, engineers, entrepreneurs, really getting hands-on on the legal, diplomacy, and policy aspects of it. And Mathias, you mentioned before the experience or the experiment of the Hague Working Group trying to bring together that diversity of views. And that was done, and we have the building blocks, but now we have processes in COPUOS happening. So Aarti, question is primarily for you, but of course, happy to hear everyone's comments on this. How do we bring together those views, the views of the industry, of the geologists, of the entrepreneurs, of the engineers, into the decision-making that will enable or direct their activities, I think, in the right direction? You mentioned that UNUSA has a new program, One Moon for All. What is the role of that, potentially? And in general, how do we make sure that in this 2-year span, we really use all the opportunities we have and the limited resources we have to achieve the result and deliver? Thank you.
Aarti.
Thank you. When I joined, we launched something called the USB, the United Nations Space Bridge, and the intention was to break down silos and build the bridges between industry and government, or space and non-space, and that applies absolutely here as well. So we, as UNUSA, our role is to build capacity as well as to serve as Secretariat to COPUOS. And in our capacity building role, as we've embodied in the One Moon for All program, we want to support the committee, support ATLAC and the working group by convening industry outside of the committee. Really, industry does not want to sit in COPUOS meetings. They would go crazy. But also, that's not the best way to extract the knowledge and the expertise that we need from industry to inform the work of the member states. So I would like to see member states focus on what they need to achieve, but we on the side will convene industry. We hope to do that later this year in a lunar industry forum. I was just discussing with Kathryn, maybe we would work together to scope that and convene that, hopefully in Vienna in November. In doing that, we would involve the chairs of ATLAC. There's 2 co-chairs. One is from Romania and one is from Pakistan. And they are member state representatives. So as I said, we want to make sure that the views of industry are synthesized, structured, feed directly into the delegates who are responsible for this work within the committee in order to inform their work streams in the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have another question from, yes.
Hi, my name's Keval Dattani, founder of Space Power. I love these kinds of events, right? We've got research institutes, we've got agencies, we've got policy, and we can all think 10 years in advance and see what we need to do today in order to have what we need tomorrow. But unfortunately, the finance sector doesn't seem to be like this, and they seem to be more interested in dessert before finishing their main course. I don't know, is there a better way rather than kind of dragging them kicking and screaming into this, either through policy or education? I don't know, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts.
I'm not quite sure we've got the best panel to answer that question. I don't even know if I could have, are there any finance people in the room?
Sorry, I'm actually interested in it from the non-finance perspective, because we need to be able to start talking to them and engage with them. I think there's a fundamental problem in the gap of time perspective or perception. And so when people will want to do robotics, so a lot of people are getting funding for crazy ideas. I mean, I heard one, growing mushrooms for lunar settlement materials, right? So we build bricks out of mushroom fiber. How are they getting funding when more pressing resources and, you know, programs aren't? And I think that there's something in the perspective change that I think we need to try to get together. And I think there's a good group in policy, academia, and founders that we can bring something together to try and communicate this better.
So if I understand correctly, how to get the message across in a coherent fashion to the finance people?
Well, the good news is there are finance people in the room, because I see them from here. I have the overview.
I think they need to put their hands up so everybody knows who to go to.
What's clear is this is part of one big challenge, and at least speaking for what we did in Luxembourg, and I'm sure, Bernhard, you will have things to say here as well. I mean, we knew from the very start that if you want to have businesses in this domain, including in space resources, you also need to find finance people at the table. And so we did a number of things to enable this, and I can give one example, but we created a venture capital fund here in Luxembourg, largely driven by the government, but bringing in private investors as well, to make sure we have at least one fund, and in the meantime I think we have at least 5 here in Luxembourg, to be able to invest in space and in space resources as well. And of course it is extremely challenging to invest in space resources related businesses, but it's not impossible, and it's much easier for finance people to do if there is this link to the terrestrial industry and to existing markets. And this is indeed what we have also promoted as an agency in Luxembourg, to find these business models that are also attractive for investors. And linked to that, of course, we have a number of investment startup programs. We have the one from ESRIC, we have the accelerator that Bernhard mentioned, we have other incubator programs where you look for these new ideas, and where finance is involved from the very start in selecting the best ideas and making sure that there is at least a possibility to have financing after the funding that is provided by the agencies.
Thank you.
No, on top of what Mathias said, I think from the agency perspective, what we can do is to be more clear about applications for which ESA could become a customer in other agencies. I mentioned before that ESA is now trying to develop this application roadmap. Some could be near-term, others are very long-term. I think if we are outspoken about near-term application, we embed them in our program, we become a customer, that would really stimulate an ESA private investment. So I think that's something we are committed to do. And I'm not sure yet what the first application will be, but that's why we start this exercise. The risk is that ESA is seen as a long-term R&D program, and that will not mobilize sufficient investment. We need to focus on applications. Yeah.
And ESA as a customer will look very good if you're going to talk to any finance person. I think, John, you wanted to mention.
Yes, so I had actually been visiting all the venture capitalists in Korea. One of the things that I noticed, I actually visited a group back in November. I gave a talk at about 50 VCs. The following time, I spoke at another one back, I think in February, end of February, beginning of this year. And I noticed that there were a lot more in the audience. And again, next month when I go back to Korea, there's going to be actually a conference, and they're expecting about 300 people from all sectors coming to this. So there is a growing interest, and one of the first questions they asked me when I gave a talk back in November was, identify a company that I can exit in 5 years. And I said, not in the space sector, you're not going to find one. But what I did tell them is that if you get into this sector, I think you're going to see within 2-3 years that there is a potential for that to happen. But that can't happen unless you folks come in. And so I am talking to the private sector, I'm talking to the VCs, and I'm talking to various investors that this indeed is a growing sector, and you need to get in now. One of the things that I mentioned I think it's in World Economic Forum, a projection for the next 10 years, it'll triple. The economy will triple, and so we certainly want to be positioned so that these companies are coming in and actually funding some of these innovative companies that are coming in with various new ideas. I'm not sure about the mushroom idea, but certainly other areas.
I think there's plenty of research on the horizon for mushrooms, anything from coffins to space, and various other things in between. Thank you very much to our panel. Thank you so much. Thank you.